The medical report lay open on Theodore Langston's mahogany desk, its clinical words burning into his consciousness like bitter acid. He ran his fingers through his dark brown hair, a gesture that had become increasingly frequent over the past week. The Manhattan skyline stretched beyond his corner office windows, a view that usually filled him with pride, but today only served as a stark reminder of how lonely it was at the top. "Are you absolutely certain about this decision?" "Eleanor." Brooks's voice cut through his thoughts. She stood near the door, her ash-blonde hair pulled back in her characteristic neat bun, her green eyes reflecting concern rather than their usual analytical sharpness. Theodore's hand moved to stroke his well-trimmed beard, a telltale sign. He was deep in thought. "What choice do I have, Eleanor? I can't—" His voice caught. "I can't do this to her." Eleanor moved closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She pulled out her ever-present notepad, a habit from her Virgo nature. But for once she wasn't writing anything down. "Have you considered that Madison deserves to make this choice for herself?" The mention of Madison's name sent a fresh wave of pain through Theodore's chest. He stood up, his imposing 6'2" frame casting a long shadow in the late afternoon light. "You didn't see her face when she talked about our future children, the way her eyes lit up discussing names, planning the nursery." He walked to the window, his reflection showing a man torn between love and what he believed was right. "Boss." Eleanor's tone shifted to the practical efficiency that had made her invaluable as his chief of operations. "You're making a unilateral decision about a partnership. That's not how you run this company, and it shouldn't be how you run your life." Theodore checked his watch. 6:45 p.m. Madison would be finishing her preschool teaching day in Boston, probably sitting cross-legged on the floor of her classroom, organizing tomorrow's activities with that infectious enthusiasm she brought to everything. His mind wandered to the way she'd scrunch her nose when concentrating, how her long, wavy brown hair would fall forward, framing her face. "I've scheduled the appointment with her for 8 p.m., Eleanor continued, consulting her phone. "Car's waiting downstairs. You can make it to Boston in time." Theodore turned sharply. "You what?" "You hired me to anticipate problems and solve them before they become crises," Eleanor replied, a hint of her characteristic sarcasm emerging. This is becoming a crisis." The drive to Boston was a blur of streetlights and remembered moments. Theodore's hands gripped the steering wheel as his mind raced through memories. Madison's green eyes sparkling with joy when he proposed, her spontaneous dance in the rain outside their favorite restaurant, the way she'd touch her nose to his before kissing him, a quirky habit that had become their thing. Madison was waiting in their favorite cafe, a small place they'd discovered, during one of their weekend getaways. She wore a flowing summer dress, her curves accentuated by the gentle fabric, her presence lighting up the room as always. The sight of her engagement ring catching the light made Theodore's heart clench. "Theo!" Her face broke into that radiant smile that had first captured his heart. She stood to embrace him, but something in his expression made her pause. "What's wrong?" He gestured for her to sit, buying time by ordering their usual drinks. Madison's intuitive nature, so typical of her Aries personality, was already picking up on the tension. "I can't marry you," Theodore said finally, the words feeling like glass in his throat. Madison's green eyes widened, confusion and hurt flooding her features. "What? Why?" Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, a nervous gesture he'd grown to love. "I received some medical results last week." He forced himself to maintain eye contact, even as her world visibly crumbled before him. "I'm infertile, Madison. I can't give you the family you've always dreamed of." The cafe's ambient noise faded away as Madison processed his words. Her breathing quickened. She always spoke faster when emotional. "Theo, we can figure this out. There are options, treatments." "I've explored everything," he cut in, his voice harder than intended. "It's definitive." Madison's hand trembled as she reached across the table. "I don't care. I love you, not some hypothetical future children. But I care." Theodore's voice rose slightly. drawing glances from nearby tables. He lowered it again. I've seen how you are with your students, how your face lights up when you talk about having our own children. I won't be the reason you give up that dream. That's not your decision to make, Madison protested, her Aries fire showing through. Then suddenly her expression changed. She looked down at her hands, then back at him with a mixture of fear and determination. Theo, there's something I need to tell you. I'm pregnant, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the cafe's background noise. The word hit Theodore like a physical blow. His mind raced to the medical report, to the definitive diagnosis. The implications crashed over him like a tidal wave. His expression must have changed because Madison's face fell, understanding dawning in her eyes. How could you? The words escaped before he could stop them, laden with hurt and accusation. Madison recoiled as if she'd been slapped. How dare you? She whispered, tears welling in her eyes. How dare you think I would ever? She stood, up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I have never been unfaithful to you, Theodore Langston. Never. This baby is yours, whether you believe it or not. She grabbed her purse, her movements sharp with anger and hurt. I came here tonight to share what I thought was a miracle. Instead, she shook her head, tears now flowing freely. Instead, I found out who you really are. Theodore sat frozen, his world spinning out of control. He watched as Madison walked away, her shoulders straight despite her tears, her head held high. The cafe door closed behind her with a final sounding click. He sat there long after she'd gone, his coffee growing cold, the ring box heavy in his pocket. Outside, Boston's evening traffic continued its steady flow, oblivious to the lives that had just shattered inside this quiet cafe. His phone buzzed, Eleanor checking in. He ignored it. The medical report's words echoed in his mind, warring with Madison's tear-stained face and her declaration of innocence. He'd made his choice based on what he thought was irrefutable medical evidence. But as he sat there, alone in the growing darkness, Theodore Langston, the self-made millionaire CEO who prided himself on always making the right decision, wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. 6 months could change everything and nothing at all. Theodore Langston stood at the edge of the Metropolitan Museum's grand ballroom, a glass of untouched scotch in his hand. The annual New York Business Leaders Gala swirled around him in a blur of designer gowns and practiced laughs, but his mind was elsewhere, as it had been every night for the past 6 months. You're doing it again, Eleanor murmured, appearing at his side in a sleek navy gown. That thing where you pretend to be present while actually drowning in guilt. Theodore's hand instinctively moved to his beard. I have a company to run. Eleanor, I don't have time for what? Feelings? She arched an eyebrow. Because burying yourself in work for the past 6 months has worked out so well. He shot her a warning look, but Eleanor had long since become immune to his CEO glare. She'd been there through everything, the sleepless nights, the obsessive work hours, the way he'd turned down every dinner invitation and charity event. Tonight was the first social gathering he hadn't managed to escape, thanks to her persistent maneuvering. The Morrison contract closed today, he said, attempting to change the subject. We should focus on... Eleanor's sharp intake of breath cut him off. Her usually composed features showed genuine shock, her eyes fixed on something across the room. Theodore followed her gaze, and the world stopped spinning. Madison. She stood near the opposite entrance, a vision in a flowing emerald gown that highlighted her curves and her obviously pregnant belly. Her brown hair cascaded in soft waves around her shoulders, and her skin seemed to glow with that mysterious radiance unique to expectant mothers. She was engaged in animated conversation with a small group, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. Theodore's glass nearly slipped from his grip. What is she doing here? She's representing the Boston Children's Education Initiative, Eleanor supplied, her tone carefully neutral. They're receiving an innovation grant tonight. Of course. Madison's passion for early childhood education had always been more than just a job. Even after everything, she'd continued pursuing her dreams. The thought hit him like a physical blow. As if sensing his gaze, Madison looked up. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to freeze. The 6 months of separation vanished, replaced by a rush of memories. Her laughter in their favorite cafe, the way she'd curl into him during thunderstorms, the hurt in her eyes that last night in Boston. Madison's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, that familiar nervous gesture now carrying new meaning. She said something to her group and began making her way across the room. Not toward him, Theodore realized, but toward the terrace, doors. Their eyes met again briefly, and he understood the unspoken invitation. "Go," Eleanor whispered, taking his glass. "Don't you dare let her walk away again." The terrace was mercifully empty, the October air just crisp enough to deter most guests. Madison stood at the railing, Manhattan's lights creating a halo around her silhouette. Theodore approached slowly, his heart thundering against his ribs. "You look—" His voice failed him. "Pregnant?" Madison supplied, turning to face him. Her green eyes held a mix of emotions he couldn't quite read. That tends to happen at 6 months. The silence between them felt electric, charged with unspoken words and buried pain. Madison's hand remained protectively over her stomach, and Theodore couldn't tear his eyes away from it. "I've missed you," he said finally, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Have you?" Her voice was quiet, but steady. "Or have you missed the idea of us? The perfect future you threw away because you couldn't trust me?" Theodore flinched. "Madison, I went to every appointment alone," she continued, her words gaining momentum like an approaching storm. "I heard our baby's heartbeat for the first time by myself. I bought my first maternity clothes alone. I learned to do prenatal yoga to stay healthy, found a new apartment, rebuilt my entire life, all while carrying your child. The child you refused to believe could be yours." Each word hit him like a hammer blow. The image of Madison going through all those moments alone, moments they should have shared together, made him physically ill. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I got new tests done, Madison. The original diagnosis. It was a mistake, a lab error." He ran a hand through his hair, fighting for composure. "I've spent 6 months trying to figure out how to tell you, how to apologize for the biggest mistake of my life." Madison's breath caught. For a moment, her carefully constructed walls seemed to waver. Then her expression hardened again. "Do you think that makes it better? That knowing it was all for nothing somehow erases what happened?" "No." Theodore stepped closer, close enough to catch the familiar scent of her perfume, mixed with something new, something distinctly maternal. "Nothing can erase what I did. But Madison—" His voice broke. "That's our baby. Our miracle. Please let me try to make this right." Before she could respond, a commotion from inside the ballroom drew their attention. Eleanor appeared at the terrace doors, her face uncharacteristically worried. "Madison, your colleague is looking for you. Something about the presentation?" Madison straightened, professional instincts taking over. "The grant speech, I need to—" "Go," Theodore said softly. "But please, can we talk? Really talk?" She hesitated at the doorway, one hand still cradling her belly. "I'm staying at the Peninsula. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., lobby cafe." She met his eyes one last time. "Don't be late." Theodore watched her disappear back into the glittering crowd, his mind racing. Through the glass doors he could see her taking the stage, her presence commanding the room as she spoke about educational innovation and the future of learning. Even from here he could see her characteristic enthusiasm shining through, the way she spoke faster when passionate about a topic. "She's different," Eleanor observed, rejoining him on the terrace. "Stronger." "She's always been strong," Theodore corrected. "I was the weak one. I let fear drive me to make the worst decision of my life." Eleanor pulled out her phone, already typing. "I'll clear your morning schedule." "Eleanor?" He turned to his friend and confidant. "Thank you for everything." She looked up from her device, her expression softening. "Just don't screw it up this time." Some miracles don't come around twice. Theodore stayed on the terrace long after the speech ended, watching Madison work the room with grace and confidence. She was no longer just his ex-fiancée. She was a mother-to-be, a successful professional, a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes of their relationship. Tomorrow morning, he would have one chance to show her he'd changed too, that he'd learned the hardest lesson of his life. That love required not just passion but trust, courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable. As he finally left the gala, the night air cool against his face, Theodore made a silent promise to both Madison and their unborn child. This time, he wouldn't let fear win. This time, he would fight for his family with everything he had. The city lights blurred as his driver navigated through Manhattan's streets, but for the first time in 6 months, Theodore felt truly awake. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. Theodore arrived at the Peninsula's lobby cafe at 9:45 a.m., his normally impeccable composure betraying signs of a sleepless night. He'd spent hours running through Central Park in the pre-dawn darkness, his usual stress relief routine doing little to calm his racing thoughts. Now, seated at a corner table with a perfect view of both entrances, he found himself adjusting his tie for the third time in 5 minutes. The cafe hummed with the quiet energy of Manhattan's elite starting their day. A fresh cup of coffee sat untouched before him, along with a pot of the chamomile tea Madison had always preferred. Some habits died hard. At exactly 10 a.m. she appeared. The morning light streaming through the cafe's grand windows caught her hair, creating a soft halo effect that made Theodore's breath catch. She wore a flowing maxi dress that accentuated her pregnancy, and he noticed she'd traded her usual heels for elegant flats, a practical concession to her changing body. "You remembered," Madison said softly, gesturing to the chamomile tea as she lowered herself into the chair across from him. Her hand automatically went to her stomach, that familiar nervous gesture that now carried so much more meaning. "I remember everything," Theodore replied, watching as she poured her tea with practiced grace, "including how you take exactly 3 sips before saying what's really on your mind." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, but her eyes remained guarded. "Some things change, Theo. I'm not the same woman who used to spend hours planning our future over tea." "I know." He leaned forward slightly. "I saw that last night. You were magnificent up there, talking about educational innovation. Your passion for teaching has only grown stronger." It had to. Madison's green eyes met his directly. "When everything else fell apart, I needed something to hold on to. My students, my work, they became my anchor." The weight of her words hung between them. Theodore's hand moved to his beard, struggling to find the right words. "Madison, about the medical results." "No." She cut him off, her voice firm. "Before we talk about that, I need you to understand something." She took a deep breath, her Aries directness coming to the fore. "The problem was never the diagnosis, Theo. The problem was that you didn't trust me. You didn't trust us." Theodore felt the truth of her words like a physical blow. "You're right," he admitted, forcing himself to maintain eye contact. "I was a coward. I let fear drive every decision I made." "Fear?" Madison's voice rose slightly. Then she caught herself, conscious of their public setting. "Fear doesn't explain how quickly you believed I could betray you. After everything we'd been through, everything we meant to each other, you looked me in the eyes and assumed I'd been unfaithful. I was wrong." The words felt insufficient, but he pressed on. "I've spent every day of the past 6 months understanding exactly how wrong I was. Not just about the diagnosis, but about everything. About who I am. About what matters in life." Madison's hand tightened around her teacup. "And what did you learn, Theodore? Besides the fact that medical tests can be wrong?" "I learned that control is an illusion." He laughed without humor. "Me, the CEO who built an empire on always being in control, I learned that the most precious things in life can't be managed like a business deal." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn envelope. "I learned that sometimes miracles don't come with explanations. Madison's eyes fixed on the envelope. What is that? Every letter I wrote you over the past 6 months. Letters I was too ashamed to send. He placed the envelope on the table between them. One for every week I missed of our child's life. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach again, but this time it was different, protective rather than nervous. The baby started kicking last month, she said quietly. The first time it happened, I was reading to my pre-K class. A story about a family of bears. Theodore's heart clenched. Another moment he should have shared. Another memory he'd lost the right to claim. Madison, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please, let me be part of this. Part of our child's life. And what happens the next time you're scared? Her voice cracked slightly. What happens when something doesn't fit into your carefully controlled world? Will you run again? No. The word came out with absolute certainty. I've learned that being strong doesn't mean having all the answers. It means being brave enough to face the unknown together. A slight movement caught his attention. Madison had pressed her hand more firmly against her side, her expression changing subtly. The baby's kicking, she said, reading his questioning look. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. Theodore held his breath as she guided his palm to rest against her stomach. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he felt it, a definite push against his hand. The world seemed to stop spinning. That's... His voice failed him completely. Your child saying hello? Madison finished, her own voice thick with emotion. For a brief moment, the walls between them seemed to thin, years of shared dreams and lost possibilities hanging in the air. Then she pulled back, carefully extracting her hand from his. This doesn't fix everything, Theo. I know. He reluctantly withdrew his hand, the phantom sensation of that kick still tingling against his palm. But it's a start, isn't it? A chance to rebuild not what we had, but something new, something stronger. Madison was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. I have a doctor's appointment next week, Tuesday, 2 p.m., Beth Israel Hospital. She met his eyes. If you want to be involved in this child's life, that's where it starts. No more running, no more letting fear make your decisions. I'll be there, Theodore promised immediately. I'll clear my entire week if you need me to. Don't. A hint of her old spark flashed in her eyes. I don't need grand gestures, Theo. I need consistency, reliability. I need to know that you're in this for real, not just when it's convenient or comfortable. As if to emphasize her point, her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. I have to go, she said, gathering her things. I'm giving a presentation at an education conference this afternoon. Theodore stood as she did, fighting the urge to help her up. She wasn't his to protect anymore. She'd proven she could take care of herself. Madison, he called as she turned to leave. Thank you. For letting me feel the baby kick. For giving me a chance to make things right. She paused, one hand resting protectively over their child. Don't thank me yet, Theodore. Proving yourself starts now. With that, she walked away, her head held high, leaving behind the untouched envelope of letters and a man finally beginning to understand the true meaning of courage. Through the cafe's windows, Theodore watched her slide into a waiting car, her driver carefully closing the door behind her. She'd built a new life in these 6 months. Successful, independent, strong. If he wanted to be part of that life, he would have to prove himself worthy of the second chance she was cautiously offering. His phone buzzed with a message from Eleanor. Board meeting in 30, don't be late. Theodore picked up the envelope of unsent letters, tucking them back into his jacket pocket. He had 6 days until the doctor's appointment to prove he could be the man Madison and their child deserved. 6 days to show that he'd truly changed. As he stepped out into the Manhattan morning, Theodore felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Real, terrifying, exhilarating hope. Now he just had to prove himself worthy of it. Eleanor Brooks stood in Theodore's office doorway watching her boss check his watch for the 5th time in 20 minutes. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan high-rise, highlighting the subtle signs of his distraction. The loosened tie, the hand constantly moving to his beard, the untouched reports on his desk. The doctor's appointment isn't until tomorrow, she reminded him, entering with her ever-present notepad. Your nervous energy isn't going to make time move faster. I'm not nervous, Theodore replied automatically, then caught her knowing look. Fine, maybe I'm a little concerned. A little? Eleanor's perfectly arched eyebrow conveyed volumes. You've been running every night this week. You're in the office before dawn, and you've reorganized your desk 3 times. I haven't seen you this wound up since the Robertson merger. Before Theodore could respond, his private line rang. The caller ID made his heart skip. Madison's name flashed on the screen. He answered immediately, putting it on speaker out of habit. Eleanor had been privy to every development this week. Madison, is everything all right? Her voice came through, strained, different from her usual confident tone. Theo, She paused, and he could hear her quick breathing. I'm at Beth Israel. I know the appointment isn't until tomorrow, but I've been having some pain, and my doctor wanted me to come in early. Theodore was on his feet before she finished speaking. I'm on my way. Which entrance? Emergency department. Another pause, longer this time. Theo, I'm scared. The vulnerability in her voice made his chest tight. I'll be there in 15 minutes, less if I can manage it. Eleanor was already moving, her Virgo efficiency in full swing. I'll have your driver bring the car around. I'll reschedule the Phillips presentation and move the board calls. Theodore grabbed his jacket, phone still pressed to his ear. Madison, stay on the line with me. I'm heading down now. The drive through Manhattan's midday traffic was excruciating. Theodore kept Madison talking, listening to her breathing, picking up every subtle change in her voice. She described the pain, sharp twinges that had started during her morning yoga session, and he could hear the fear she was trying to mask with clinical details. Remember when we got caught in that thunderstorm in Central Park? He said suddenly, trying to distract her. You were terrified of lightning, but you refused to let it show. A small laugh, slightly strained but real. I remember you trying to shield me with your jacket, even though we were already soaked. You said we looked like drowned rats at that charity gala. We did. Her breath caught, and he heard her shift position. The pain's getting stronger, Theo. I'm almost there. He leaned forward as if it could make the car move faster. 3 more blocks. The emergency department was a maze of controlled chaos. Theodore found Madison in a private room, already changed into a hospital gown, her hands protectively cradling her stomach. The sight of her looking small and vulnerable in the hospital bed made his throat tight. Hey, he said softly, moving to her side. Without thinking, he reached for her hand. To his surprise, she gripped it tightly. You came. Of course I came. He squeezed her hand gently. I told you. No more running. The doctor arrived moments later, a calm-faced woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Richardson. She reviewed Madison's symptoms while setting up an ultrasound machine. Let's take a look at what's going on, Dr. Richardson said, applying gel to Madison's stomach. The room filled with the rapid whoosh-whoosh of their baby's heartbeat. Theodore felt Madison's grip on his hand tighten. He watched the screen intently, though he couldn't make sense of the gray shadows and movements. The doctor's expression remained neutral as she moved the wand, taking measurements and typing notes with her free hand. The good news, Dr. Richardson finally said, is that your baby is doing well. Strong heartbeat, good movement. However, she pointed to an area on the screen. I'm seeing some concerning changes in your cervical length. This, combined with the pain you're experiencing, suggests early labor signs. Madison's breath hitched. But I'm only 26 weeks. Which is why we're going to be very proactive. The doctor's voice was calm but firm. I'm admitting you for observation and starting you on medication to stop the contractions. You'll need complete bed rest for at least the next few weeks. Bed rest? Madison's voice rose slightly. But I have classes to teach, presentations. Next week, the education initiative. None of which matters compared to keeping you and our baby safe, Theodore interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. He turned to the doctor. What do we need to do? Dr. Richardson outlined the plan: medication, monitoring, strict bed rest, and regular checkups. As she spoke, Theodore could feel Madison's mounting tension. He knew her well enough to recognize the signs, the slight flush in her cheeks, the way her free hand moved restlessly over her stomach, the quickening of her breath. When the doctor left, promising to return with admission papers, Madison finally broke. I can't do this, Theo. My whole life is about being active, teaching, moving. I can't just lie here for weeks. Hey. He moved to sit on the edge of her bed, still holding her hand. Remember what you told me about fear? About not letting it make our decisions? He waited until she met his eyes. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm telling. He smiled slightly. I'm the CEO of a major corporation, remember? Organizing things is what I do best. Despite her anxiety, Madison managed a weak smile. You can't CEO your way through this, Theodore. Watch me. He pulled out his phone, already texting Eleanor. First, we're getting you settled in a private room, something with a view. You'll need something better to look at than these walls. Then we'll figure out remote teaching options for your classes. Video lessons, maybe? The kids would love that. Madison watched him, her expression a mix of amusement and something deeper. You really have changed, haven't you? I had a good teacher. He met her gaze. Someone once showed me that real strength isn't about control. It's about adapting, about facing challenges together. A nurse arrived with medication and admission forms, interrupting the moment. As Theodore helped Madison with the paperwork, his phone buzzed with responses from Eleanor. She'd already contacted the hospital's administrative office about a private room and was researching the best remote teaching technology available. Hours later, Madison was settled in a spacious corner room with a view of the city skyline. The medication had helped with the pain, but doctor's orders were clear: complete rest, minimal movement, and constant monitoring. You should go, Madison said softly, noticing Theodore checking his messages. You must have 1,000 things to deal with at work. Nothing that can't wait. He pulled a chair closer to her bed. Unless, do you want me to go? She was quiet for a moment, her hand moving in slow circles over her stomach. No, she finally admitted. I'd like you to stay. Just for a while. Theodore settled into the chair, sending Eleanor a quick message about handling the day's remaining meetings. Outside the window, Manhattan's lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. In the quiet of the hospital room, watching Madison's eyes grow heavy with medication-induced drowsiness, he made a silent promise to their unborn child. This time would be different. This time, he would be the man his family needed him to be, not perfect but present, not in control but committed. As Madison drifted off to sleep, her hand still loosely holding his, Theodore realized something profound. Sometimes the biggest acts of courage weren't grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes they were as simple as sitting quietly, in a hospital room, holding someone's hand and facing an uncertain future together. A week into Madison's hospital stay, her private room had transformed into what Eleanor jokingly called Command Central. A sleek laptop sat on an adjustable bed table, surrounded by teaching materials and children's books. A large monitor mounted on the wall allowed Madison to conduct virtual classes, her pre-K students' faces filling the screen with gap-toothed smiles and endless enthusiasm. And what sound does the letter B make? Madison asked, her voice animated despite her confined position. 20 tiny voices responded with exaggerated buzzing sounds, making her laugh. Theodore paused in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt. He'd learned to love these moments. Watching Madison teach from her hospital bed, her natural talent shining through despite the circumstances. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and she wore one of the comfortable maternity nightgowns Eleanor had helped select, soft blue cotton that made her green eyes seem even brighter. "Excellent job, everyone," Madison praised her virtual class. "Remember to practice your letters with your parents, and I'll see you tomorrow." She blew kisses to the screen, waiting until the last child had waved goodbye before ending the session. "That was impressive," Theodore said, finally entering. "Especially the kid who insisted B was for bulldozer." Madison's face lit up, then quickly tried to hide her enthusiasm. "Little Carson. He's obsessed with construction vehicles." She noticed the paper bag in Theodore's hand. "Please tell me that's not another healthy smoothie from your personal chef." He laughed, pulling up his usual chair beside her bed. "No smoothies today. Eleanor mentioned you were craving something specific." He reached into the bag and produced a carefully wrapped sandwich. 1 grilled cheese from Melville's, extra sharp cheddar, thin sliced tomatoes, and just a hint of garlic butter. Madison's eyes widened. "You remembered my exact order? From that little place in Boston?" "I may have had my driver make a special trip." He handed her the sandwich, still warm. "The doctor said your appetite improving was a good sign. I figured comfort food couldn't hurt." She took a bite, closing her eyes in appreciation. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." He watched her enjoy the sandwich, noticing how her color had improved over the past week. "How are you feeling today? Really?" Madison considered the question, one hand moving to her stomach, a gesture he'd noticed happened more frequently now. "The contractions have stopped completely. Dr. Richardson says my numbers are improving, but..." She sighed. 3 more weeks of bed rest minimum. I'm going crazy, Theo." "I know." He resisted the urge to take her hand, still learning the new boundaries between them. "But you're doing amazing things even from this bed. Those kids adore you." "It's not the same." She set down the sandwich, frustration creeping into her voice. "I should be preparing the nursery, taking prenatal classes, getting ready for our baby's arrival. Instead, I'm stuck here, terrified that any wrong move could..." Her voice cracked, and this time Theodore did reach for her hand. To his relief, she didn't pull away. "Madison," he said softly, "you are the strongest person I know." "And our baby?" He smiled, already showing that same strength. Fighting spirit must run in the family. She gave him a watery laugh. "That's your diplomatic CEO voice. No, that's my I'm in awe of you voice." He squeezed her hand gently. "Want to know a secret? I've been taking online prenatal classes." Madison stared at him. "You what?" Theodore felt his ears redden slightly. "Eleanor found a virtual program. I've been doing the sessions in my office during lunch. Did you know babies can hear voices from inside the womb, and that skin-to-skin contact immediately after birth is crucial for bonding?" "Theodore Langston," Madison said slowly, "are you telling me that you, the man who once scheduled board meetings during dinner dates, are watching birthing videos between corporate acquisitions?" "I'm trying," he admitted. "I want to understand everything, be prepared for anything." He ran a hand through his hair. "I know it doesn't make up for missing the first 6 months, but..." A sharp knock interrupted them. Dr. Richardson entered, clipboard in hand and a serious expression on her face. "Madison, Theodore," she greeted them. "I've been reviewing your latest tests." Theodore felt Madison's hand tighten in his. "Is something wrong?" "Your cervical length has stabilized," the doctor began, "which is excellent news. However, your blood pressure readings have been climbing over the past 24 hours. I'm concerned about the possibility of preeclampsia developing." Madison's medical knowledge from her pregnancy research kicked in. "But that could mean we may need to consider an early delivery if your numbers don't improve," Dr. Richardson confirmed. "Not immediately, but we need to be prepared. I'm adding some medication to your regimen and increasing monitoring." Theodore listened as the doctor outlined the new treatment plan. asking detailed questions about risks and alternatives. He could feel Madison's growing tension and found himself unconsciously rubbing small circles on the back of her hand with his thumb, a calming gesture from their shared past. After the doctor left, Madison remained quiet, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. The half-eaten sandwich lay forgotten on her table. "Talk to me," Theodore urged gently. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about how nothing in my life has gone according to plan," she said finally. "My relationship, my pregnancy, my career, everything's just—" She gestured helplessly with her free hand. "Sometimes the best things in life aren't planned," Theodore replied. "Remember how we met? You spilled coffee all over my custom suit at that education fundraiser." A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "You were so annoyed until I told you off for trying to buy my silence with a replacement coffee. No one had ever stood up to me like that." He chuckled at the memory. "I was smitten before my suit had dried. And now look at us." Madison's voice softened. "Back in each other's lives because of another unplanned moment." Theodore shifted closer, his expression growing serious. "Madison, I know we can't go back to what we were. Too much has happened. But these past few days being here with you, watching you teach, learning about our baby, I'm not here out of obligation or guilt. I'm here because there's nowhere else I want to be." She studied his face for a long moment. "I'm scared, Theo. Not just about the pregnancy complications, about everything, about trusting again, about letting you back in." "I know." He held her gaze. "And I'm going to spend every day proving that your trust isn't misplaced. Not just with grand gestures or grilled cheese deliveries, but with consistency, with presence, with—" He was interrupted by a sudden movement under their joined hands. Madison's eyes widened. "Someone agrees with you," she whispered, moving their hands to a different spot on her stomach. "Feel that? The baby always moves more when you're talking." Theodore felt the strong kicks against his palm and his heart swelled. "Hey there, little one," he said softly. "We've got this, okay? All three of us together." As if in response, the baby kicked again. Madison laughed, a real, full laugh that lit up her entire face. For a moment, the worry lines disappeared, replaced by pure joy. Eleanor found them like that an hour later, Madison asleep with one hand on her stomach, Theodore still holding her other hand, his laptop balanced precariously as he reviewed contracts one-handed. She didn't comment on the half-eaten grilled cheese or the way her boss's chair had somehow moved closer to the bed. Instead, she quietly updated him on the day's meetings and left a fresh stack of prenatal magazines on the side table. Sometimes she reflected as she left. The strongest foundations were built in the quietest moments, and watching her friend, finally becoming the man he was meant to be, that was worth every rescheduled meeting in the world. Theodore was in the middle of a crucial board meeting when Eleanor burst through the conference room doors, something she'd never done in all their years working together. One look at her face had him on his feet before she could speak. "Madison," was all she said. The board members watched in stunned silence as their CEO dropped his presentation remote and bolted for the door, leaving Eleanor to handle the fallout. His heart hammered against his ribs as they rode the elevator down, her words filling in the gaps. Her blood pressure spiked dramatically during her morning check. Dr. Richardson is concerned about seizure risk. They're preparing for an emergency, C-section. Theodore loosened his tie, feeling like he couldn't breathe. "But she's only 28 weeks. The NICU team is standing by." Eleanor's voice remained steady, but her hands gripped her phone tightly. "I've already called your driver. He's waiting out front." The usually composed CEO practically ran through the lobby, ignoring the startled looks from employees. His mind raced with fragments from his prenatal research. 28 weeks, severe preeclampsia, survival rates, complications, each fact more terrifying than the last. "Call me when you know anything," Eleanor called as he jumped into the waiting car. "And Theodore? She needs you steady right now." The drive to Beth Israel felt endless. Theodore found himself touching his beard repeatedly, a nervous tell he couldn't control. When his phone buzzed, he nearly dropped it in his haste to answer. "Theo?" Madison's voice was tight with fear. They're prepping me for surgery. The baby's heart rate is dropping and my pressure won't stabilize and I'm almost there. He cut in, hearing the panic rising in her voice. 5 minutes tops, just hold on. I can't do this alone, she whispered. You're not alone. Not anymore. Not ever again. He pressed his hand against the car window as if he could push through it to reach her. Remember what you told your class yesterday about being brave? About how courage isn't about not being scared, but about facing our fears? A weak laugh. Using my own teaching philosophy against me? Learning from the best. He saw the hospital, approaching. I'm pulling up now. Don't you dare let them start without me. He found her in pre-op, already changed and prepped, her face pale against the stark white pillows. The usual warmth in her green eyes was clouded with fear, but she managed to smile when he burst in, still in his business suit. Sir, you'll need to change into scrubs. A nurse intercepted him, holding out blue surgical wear. Theodore changed in record time, following every instruction about surgical cleanliness with military precision. When he finally reached Madison's side, he took her hand, noticing how cold her fingers felt. Hey, he said softly, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. Quite a way to get out of bed rest, huh? She tried to smile but winced as another monitor started beeping. Dr. Richardson appeared, her face serious behind her surgical mask. We need to move now, she announced. Madison's pressure is still climbing, and the baby's showing signs of distress. Are you ready? Madison's grip on Theodore's hand tightened. No choice, right? I'll be right here, Theodore promised as they began wheeling her toward the operating room. Every step of the way. The OR was organized chaos, monitors beeping, medical staff moving with practiced efficiency, the sharp smell of antiseptic filling the air. Theodore followed the anesthesiologist's instructions, positioning himself near Madison's head, still holding her hand. Talk to me, Madison whispered as the final preparations began. Distract me, please. Theodore leaned close, his voice steady, despite his racing heart. Did I ever tell you about my first attempt at cooking? Back in college? She shook her head slightly, and he could see her trying to focus on his words instead of the medical activity happening behind the surgical drape. I tried to impress this girl by making what I thought was a simple pasta dish. Ended up setting off 3 fire alarms and turning the noodles into cement. He stroked her hand with his thumb. The girl wasn't impressed, but my roommate's dog loved it. Ate the whole disaster and then threw up on my economics textbook. A small laugh escaped Madison, quickly followed by a nervous breath as she felt pressure from the surgery beginning. You never told me that story before, she managed. I've got plenty more embarrassing tales saved up. Figured our kids should know their dad isn't perfect. He kept his voice light even as he watched the monitors with hawk-like intensity. Though I've improved since then, I can now successfully operate a microwave without major incident. Significant drop in heart rate, a nurse called out. BP still rising. Dr. Richardson's voice was calm but urgent. We need to move faster. Madison, you're going to feel more pressure. Theodore, keep her focused on you. Madison's face had gone even paler, fear flooding her features. Theodore moved closer until his face filled her field of vision. Look at me, he commanded gently. Just me. Remember our first dance at the Chapman Charity Gala? You were wearing that incredible blue dress, and I kept stepping on your feet because I was so nervous about having the most beautiful woman in the room in my arms. You never told me you were nervous, Madison whispered, her voice shaking. You seemed so confident. Terrified, he corrected. But you made me brave. You've always made me brave. A sudden flurry of activity behind the drape, then piercing through the tension, a cry, tiny but fierce, announcing its presence to the world. Baby's out, Dr. Richardson called. Small but fighting. Theodore felt tears streaming down his face as he watched the NICU team spring into action. Their child so impossibly small, yet already showing that signature family determination. Girl or boy? Madison asked weakly, her own eyes filled with tears. A girl, one of the nurses called out. 2 pounds, 4 ounces. Strong heartbeat. A daughter, Theodore breathed, pressing his forehead to Madison's. We have a daughter. The moment of joy was shattered by a sudden cascade of alarms. Madison's grip on his hand went slack. BP dropping rapidly, someone shouted. She's hemorrhaging. Get him out, Dr. Richardson ordered. Now! Theodore felt hands pulling him, away from Madison. The last thing he saw before being pushed out of the OR was her face, too pale against the surgical drapes, as medical staff swarmed around her. The next hour was the longest of his life. He paced the waiting area, still in surgical scrubs, alternating between staring at the OR doors and the entrance to the NICU where his daughter had been whisked away. Eleanor arrived at some point, taking charge as she always did, handling calls, arranging for specialists, making sure everything possible was being done for both Madison and the baby. She has to be okay, Theodore said hoarsely, running, his hands through his hair for the 100th time. They both have to be okay. I can't. They will be, Eleanor cut in firmly. Madison's the strongest person we know, and that little girl, she's got both your stubbornness. They're fighters. Finally, Dr. Richardson emerged, looking tired but relieved. We've stabilized her, she announced before Theodore could speak. The hemorrhage was severe, but we caught it in time. She's being moved to recovery now. Theodore sagged against the wall, his legs barely supporting him. And our daughter? The NICU team will update you shortly, but initial reports are positive. She's small, but showing remarkable strength for her gestational age. The doctor smiled behind her mask. Congratulations, Dad. You have quite a pair of warriors there. Eleanor squeezed his arm. Go. I'll handle everything else. Theodore moved through the hospital halls in a daze, torn between two rooms, two bedsides, two pieces of his heart. But as he looked through the NICU window at his tiny daughter, then toward the recovery room where Madison lay, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was what real strength looked like. Not in grand business deals or power moves, but in the quiet courage of a premature baby fighting for life, and the incredible woman who had brought her into the world. He touched the window separating him from his daughter, making a silent promise to them both. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as a family. 3 days after the emergency C-section, Theodore sat in what had become his usual spot, the comfortable rocking chair between Madison's recovery room and the NICU incubator that housed their daughter. He'd barely left the hospital, sleeping, in short bursts and relying on Eleanor to keep his company running from afar. You should go home, Madison said softly from her bed where she was finally sitting up, though still pale and tired. Get some real rest. Theodore shook his head, his hand resting on the incubator's clear wall. Inside, their daughter, all 2 pounds, 4 ounces of her, fought for every breath, surrounded by monitors and tubes. I'm exactly where I need to be. Madison watched him, noting the stubble that had grown past his usually well-maintained beard, the wrinkled casual clothes that had replaced his pristine suits. We still haven't named her, she said after a moment. Theodore turned to face her, his expression softening. I thought, maybe you'd want to choose. You've done all the hard work. We should decide together. Madison shifted carefully, mindful of her healing incision. She needs a strong name, something that reflects the fighter she is. As if on cue, their daughter's tiny hand moved, reaching out through one of the incubator's portholes. Theodore gently touched her palm with his pinky, the only part of him that didn't seem impossibly large compared to her delicate fingers. What about Victoria? He suggested. It means victory. Madison's eyes filled with tears. Victoria Grace, she added, because she's our saving grace. Victoria Grace Langston. Theodore tested the name, watching their daughter respond to his voice with another tiny movement. Perfect. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Dr. Liu, the NICU specialist, entered, with her usual quiet efficiency. How's our little fighter doing today? She moved her hand, Theodore reported immediately. And her color seems better. The doctor smiled as she checked Victoria's vitals. She's making progress. Her oxygen levels are stabilizing and she's responding well to the treatments. She made some notes in the chart. Madison, how are you feeling? Strong enough for some kangaroo care today? Madison sat up straighter, hope lighting her features. Really? I can hold her? Brief contact with full monitoring, Dr. Liu cautioned. But skin-to-skin contact is crucial for premature babies. It helps regulate their temperature, breathing, and heart rate. Dad can take a turn too. The next hour was a carefully choreographed dance of medical precision. Nurses helped Madison into a special chair, adjusting her gown for optimal skin contact. With painstaking care, they transferred Victoria, still connected to her monitors, onto Madison's chest. Theodore watched, his heart in his throat, as their impossibly tiny daughter was placed against Madison's skin. The moment Victoria settled, her stats on the monitor improved slightly. She knows her mama, one of the nurses said softly. Madison's tears fell freely as she cradled their daughter. Hi, sweet girl, she whispered. I've been waiting so long to hold you. Theodore couldn't take his eyes off them, the two strongest people he'd ever known, finally together. He reached for his phone, wanting to capture this moment, then stopped himself. Go ahead, Madison said, reading his hesitation. Our first family photo should be real. No makeup, no fancy clothes. Just us. The picture he took captured everything. Madison's tired but radiant smile, Victoria's tiny form against her mother's skin, the medical equipment that surrounded them, a testament to their journey and their triumph. Your turn, Dad, Dr. Liu announced after 20 minutes. Theodore froze. What if I hurt her? She's so small. You won't, Madison assured him. She needs this, needs you. With the same care they'd shown Madison, the nurses helped transfer Victoria to Theodore's broad chest. He sat perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe, as his daughter settled against him. Her weight, barely more than a feather, anchored him to the moment in a way nothing ever had before. Look at that, Madison said softly. She's completely relaxed with you. Theodore felt something wet on his cheeks and realized he was crying. Here was this tiny person, this perfect mixture of him and Madison, trusting him completely. All his business success, all his carefully constructed control, meant nothing compared to this moment. I'm sorry, he whispered, so quietly only Madison could hear. For everything. For almost missing this. Madison reached out and took his hand. You're here now. That's what matters. A comfortable silence fell, broken only by the steady beeping of monitors and Victoria's soft breaths. Theodore found himself gently rocking, an instinct he didn't know he possessed, while Madison watched them with tired but happy eyes. Eleanor's arrival an hour later was preceded by her efficient heel clicks. She paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Theodore in the rocking chair, Victoria sleeping peacefully on his chest, Madison dozing in her bed. The board is asking, she began quietly. Tell them I'm taking a leave of absence, Theodore interrupted, not looking up from his daughter. Effective immediately. Eleanor's usual professional mask cracked into a genuine smile. Already done. I had the paperwork prepared 3 days ago. She set a bag down quietly. I brought fresh clothes for both of you, some decent coffee, and she pulled out a tiny pink hat, barely bigger than her palm. The NICU nurses said she might be ready to wear this soon. Madison stirred at their voices. Eleanor, you're an angel. Just doing my job. She moved closer to peek at Victoria. Though I might need a new title. Chief Operations Officer and Baby Supply Coordinator has a nice ring to it. Theodore finally looked up at his friend, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. For everything. Eleanor waved off his gratitude with characteristic efficiency, but her eyes were suspiciously bright. The nurses said you haven't eaten since breakfast. Both of you. I'll go get something suitable from that little cafe down the street. After she left, Madison turned to Theodore. You're really taking a leave of absence? The company will survive without me. He adjusted Victoria slightly as she squirmed. This is where I belong right now. Besides, he added with a small smile, Eleanor probably runs things better than I do anyway. You've changed so much, Madison observed, her voice wondering. I had to. He met her eyes. When I lost you, when I let fear drive my decisions, I lost myself too. But this? He looked down at their daughter. This is who I want to be, who I need to be. For both of you. Victoria chose that moment to stretch, her tiny fingers spreading against Theodore's chest like a starfish. Both parents watched, entranced as she settled again with a sigh that seemed too big for her small body. We have a long road ahead, Madison cautioned, ever practical despite her exhaustion. The NICU journey isn't easy. Then we'll face it together. Theodore's voice held absolute certainty. One day at a time, one breath at a time. Whatever Victoria needs, whatever you need, I'm here. Madison's eyes filled with fresh tears, but her smile was radiant. Together, she agreed softly. Outside their room, the hospital continued its endless rhythm of life and death, crisis and healing. But in this moment, in this space between heartbeats, a family that had almost been lost found itself again, stronger, wiser, and bound together by the tiny miracle breathing peacefully against her father's heart. 2 weeks into their NICU journey, Theodore had mastered a new set of skills vastly different from his corporate expertise. He could change a diaper through incubator portholes with surgical precision, interpret oxygen saturation readings at a glance, and distinguish between every beep and alarm on Victoria's monitors. Her weight's up to 2 pounds, 9 ounces, he reported to Madison one morning, reading from the meticulous journal he'd started keeping. His signature, neat handwriting filled pages with every detail of their daughter's progress. That's 2 ounces more than yesterday. Madison smiled from the rocking chair where she was preparing for Victoria's morning feeding. Though still recovering from her C-section, she'd insisted on being present for every care session possible. Soon she'll be bigger than that bear Eleanor brought. The tiny stuffed bear sat in the corner of Victoria's incubator, thoroughly sanitized and approved by the NICU staff, watching over their daughter like a plush guardian angel. At the moment, Victoria seemed determined to outshine her toy companion, stretching her arms in a way that made both parents' hearts skip. She's getting stronger, Dr. Liu commented as she entered for morning rounds. Her lung function is improving, and she's tolerating her feedings well. The doctor smiled at Madison. Ready to try breastfeeding today? Madison's eyes widened. Really? But I thought she was too small. She's showing all the right signs, Dr. Liu assured her. We'll still supplement with the feeding tube, but skin-to-skin contact during feeding attempts can make a huge difference. Theodore watched as the nurses helped position Victoria against Madison's chest. Their daughter, who had seemed so fragile just weeks ago, now moved with surprising determination, her tiny hands curling and uncurling as she found her way. Oh! Madison's voice was thick with emotion. She's doing it. She's actually... Theodore moved closer, one hand resting on Madison's shoulder, the other gently supporting Victoria's back. The moment felt sacred, their little family connected, in the most fundamental way. You're both amazing, he whispered, pressing a kiss to Madison's temple without thinking. She stiffened slightly at the gesture, and Theodore immediately started to pull back. But then Madison leaned into his touch, just slightly, and something in his chest unclenched. Mr. Langston? A nurse appeared at the door. There's a call for you at the desk. Something about an urgent board matter? Theodore straightened, his jaw tightening. Tell them, go, Madison interrupted. We're okay here. Victoria and I have this covered. He hesitated, looking between them. Theo, Madison's voice softened. You've been here every moment for 2 weeks. It's okay to take care of business sometimes, too. We'll still be here when you get back. The call turned out to be about a potential hostile takeover attempt, vultures circling while they thought the CEO was distracted. Theodore handled it with his usual strategic precision, but his mind never fully left the NICU. When he returned an hour later, he found Madison teaching Victoria about colors, her teacher's instincts shining through despite their unusual classroom. "And this is blue, sweet girl, like the sky you'll see soon, and green like Mama's eyes." She looked up as Theodore entered. "Everything okay at the office?" "Nothing Eleanor can't handle." He settled into his usual chair. "Did I miss anything?" She grabbed my finger during feeding, actually grabbed and held on. Madison's face glowed with pride. "Dr. Liu says her reflexes are getting stronger." Theodore pulled out his journal to record this milestone, then noticed Madison watching him with an odd expression. "What?" "I found your other notebook," she said quietly. "The one with all the research about preemie development, feeding schedules, cognitive stimulation. You left it in the parent lounge yesterday." He felt his ears redden. "I just want to be prepared to understand everything she needs." "You're an amazing father, Theodore." Her voice caught slightly. "The way you've stepped up, how dedicated you are to learning everything, being here for every moment." "I meant what I said about not running anymore." He met her eyes. "About being the man you both deserve." A comfortable silence fell, broken only by Victoria's soft noises as she dozed against Madison's chest. Outside their NICU room, nurses changed shifts, monitors beeped, and life continued its hospital rhythm. But inside, time seemed to move differently, measured in tiny breaths and small victories. "I've been thinking," Madison said finally, "about what happens when she's strong enough to go home." Theodore's heart rate picked up. They hadn't discussed the future, both focused solely on getting through each day in the NICU. "My apartment's too small," she continued. "And it's a fourth-floor walk-up. With a preemie, that's not—" "Move in with me," Theodore said immediately, then caught himself. "I mean, I have the penthouse, plenty of space, elevator access, and I could convert the home office into a nursery. Or—" he ran a hand through his hair. "I could help you. Find something else. Whatever you're comfortable with." Madison was quiet for a long moment, her fingers trailing gentle patterns on Victoria's back. "Would you give up control of the nursery design?" He blinked. "What?" "If I moved in, would you let me make the decisions about the nursery, even if my ideas didn't match your aesthetic?" Theodore understood the real question beneath her words. Would he truly share power? Accept her choices? Let go of his need to control everything? "I trust your vision completely," he said softly, "though I do have one small request." Madison raised an eyebrow. "Could we keep the stuffed bear?" Her laugh, bright and genuine, made Victoria stir. They both froze, but their daughter simply yawned and settled back to sleep, one tiny hand splayed against Madison's heart. "We could try it," Madison said carefully. "Living together. For Victoria's sake." "But Theo—" She met his eyes. "We'd need boundaries, clear expectations. I'm not ready for—" "I know." He nodded. "Friends and co-parents first. Everything else, we'll figure out one day at a time, just like we're doing here." Before Madison could respond, Victoria made a small sound of protest as her feeding tube shifted slightly. Both parents moved in perfect synchronization, Theodore adjusting the tube while Madison soothed their daughter with gentle pats. "We make a good team," Madison observed once Victoria had settled again. "We always did," Theodore smiled, "even when I was too blind to see it." A knock at the door revealed Eleanor, arriving for her daily visit with fresh coffee and an update on the company. She took in the peaceful scene before her. "Should I come back later?" she asked, noting the intimate atmosphere. "No, stay," Madison invited. "We were just discussing living arrangements for when Victoria comes home." Eleanor's perfectly maintained eyebrows rose slightly, but she kept her tone neutral. "Really? And what did you decide?" "We're going to try living together," Theodore answered. "As friends," he added quickly. "For Victoria." "Mm-hmm." Eleanor's knowing look spoke volumes as she settled into a chair. "Just friends, of course." Victoria chose that moment to stretch dramatically, her tiny movements capturing everyone's attention. In the 2 weeks since her birth, she'd already developed a knack for directing the emotional flow of a room, a trait Theodore insisted came from Madison's teaching abilities, while Madison claimed it was pure CEO genetics. "One day at a time," Madison repeated softly, almost to herself. Theodore watched his daughter's tiny chest rise and fall, watched Madison's gentle care, and felt something settle in his soul. One day at a time was perfect. They had all the time in the world to get this right. After all, their greatest miracle was teaching them patience, one breath at a time. At 6 weeks old, Victoria Grace Langston had achieved what her father's business associates would call all target metrics. Her weight had climbed to 4 pounds, 3 ounces, she was breathing independently, and she had mastered both bottle and breastfeeding. The NICU team had finally spoken the words every parent longed to hear. She was ready to go home. "The nursery's finished," Theodore announced, showing Madison photos on his phone as they sat in their usual spots by Victoria's incubator. "Eleanor supervised everything according to your designs." Madison swiped through the images, her eyes widening. The room was exactly as she'd envisioned. Soft mint green walls, delicate cloud details, and the reading nook she'd dreamed of creating for story time. "It's perfect. Even the little bookshelf with the moon decal." "I may have added one small thing," Theodore admitted, reaching the final photo. There, in the corner of the room, was a custom-made rocking chair, not the standard nursery furniture she'd selected, but an exact replica of the NICU chair where they'd spent countless hours with Victoria. Madison's throat tightened. "You remembered." "Of course." He watched her face carefully. "Is it okay? I know we agreed you'd make all the decisions, but it's more than okay." She touched the screen gently. "It's thoughtful. Perfect for late-night feedings." Their eyes met over the phone, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged with unspoken emotions. Theodore found himself noticing how the NICU lighting caught the golden highlights in Madison's hair, how her green eyes seemed brighter now that she'd fully recovered her strength. Victoria broke the moment with a demanding squawk, another milestone achieved, finding her voice. Madison turned to their daughter with a laugh. "Yes, Princess, we hear you." She reached into the incubator to stroke Victoria's cheek. "Ready to see your new room?" Dr. Liu arrived for final discharge instructions, her usual clipboard supplemented with packets of information. "Remember, preemie care at home is different from full-term infant care. You'll need to be extra vigilant about—" Theodore took detailed notes while Madison asked questions. They'd both attended the parent preparation classes, but nothing felt quite real until this moment. Tomorrow, they'd be solely responsible for their tiny daughter's well-being. "One last thing," Dr. Liu said, her expression softening. "You've both done an amazing job here. Victoria's progress is remarkable, and a lot of that comes down to your dedication. Trust yourselves. You're ready for this next step." After the doctor left, Theodore and Madison began their practiced routine of care, moving in synchronized harmony born of weeks of practice. As Madison changed Victoria's diaper, Theodore prepared her bottle with precise measurements. "I was thinking," Madison said carefully, lifting their daughter, "about sleeping arrangements." Theodore froze momentarily before continuing to test the bottle's temperature. "Oh? Maybe. Maybe I should take the guest room next to the nursery instead of the one down the hall, just for the first few weeks, to be closer for night feedings." "That makes sense." He kept his voice neutral, though his heart rate had picked up. The guest room next to the nursery was also right across from the master suite, his room. Practical. Madison settled into the rocking chair, cradling Victoria, for her feeding, just until we establish a routine. "Of course." He handed her the bottle, their fingers brushing slightly. "Whatever you think is best." The door opened, revealing Eleanor laden with shopping bags. "Final delivery for the homecoming," she announced. "Everything on the list, and then some." Theodore helped her unload. Preemie-sized clothes, special bottles, the particular brand of diapers the NICU recommended, and what looked like enough baby supplies to stock a small store. "I might have gone a bit overboard," Eleanor admitted, arranging items with her characteristic precision. "Might have?" Madison laughed. "Did you buy the entire baby boutique?" "Please, only the essential items." Eleanor's perfectly maintained composure cracked slightly. "And maybe a few extra outfits. She needs options for her first photo shoot." "Photo shoot?" Theodore raised an eyebrow. "The company newsletter wants to do a feature," Eleanor explained. "Board members have been asking for updates. Everyone's invested in Victoria's story." Madison tensed slightly. "I'm not sure about publicity." "No press," Theodore said immediately. "The newsletter can mention that she's home and healthy, but no photos, no details. Our daughter isn't a corporate PR opportunity." Eleanor nodded, already typing on her phone. "Understood. I'll handle it." Madison gave him a grateful look over Victoria's head. He'd known instinctively that she wouldn't want their daughter's journey made public, wouldn't want their private struggles turned into a feel-good business story. "Oh," Eleanor brightened. "Before I forget, the pediatrician's office called to confirm tomorrow's home visit, and the lactation consultant is scheduled for Thursday." Theodore and Madison exchanged amused glances. Eleanor had smoothly transitioned from running a corporation to managing their daughter's care team with the same exceptional efficiency. "What would we do without you?" Madison asked sincerely. "Let's never find out." Eleanor's phone buzzed. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go terrorize some board members who think they can schedule meetings during Victoria's designated arrival time tomorrow." After she left, a comfortable silence fell. Victoria had dozed off after her feeding, one tiny hand curled around Madison's finger. She'd grown so much stronger, but she still seemed impossibly small to be leaving the security of the NICU. "Are you scared?" Madison asked softly, voicing the fear Theodore had been trying to suppress. "Terrified," he admitted. "You?" "Same." She stroked Victoria's cheek. "But also excited. Ready?" Theodore moved closer, perching on the arm of the rocking chair. "We've got this. Between your teaching experience, my obsessive research, and Eleanor's organizational skills, plus the fact that this little one is clearly a genius." Madison smiled as Victoria yawned. "Did you see how she tracked the nurses' movement earlier? Advanced for her age, they said. Obviously gets that from her mother." Theodore's voice was soft, along with her determination and her beauty. Madison's breath caught slightly, but she didn't pull away when his hand came to rest beside hers on Victoria's blanket. Their fingers weren't quite touching, but the possibility hung in the air between them. "Theo," she started. "I know," he said quickly. "Friends, co-parents. I remember the boundaries." She looked up at him, her expression complex. "Do you ever wonder?" "Every day," he admitted quietly. Victoria stirred, breaking the moment with perfect timing. Both parents refocused on their daughter, falling back into their practiced care routine. But something had shifted, like a change in atmospheric pressure before a storm. As they prepared for their final night in the NICU, Theodore found himself watching Madison sing softly to Victoria. Tomorrow they would leave this place that had become a second home, taking their precious daughter into the world beyond these protective walls. They would navigate midnight feedings and pediatrician visits, share morning coffee over monitor checks, and learn their daughter's patterns together. Friends and co-parents, they'd agreed. But watching Madison's gentle care, remembering the feel of almost touching fingers, Theodore wondered if the heart could be bound by such carefully drawn lines, if love, like their daughter, might prove stronger than any barriers placed around it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, new hopes. But tonight, in the quiet of the NICU, three hearts beat in imperfect synchronicity, a family finding its rhythm, one precious moment at a time. 2 months after bringing Victoria home, Theodore stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching Madison rock their daughter in the custom chair that had become their favorite spot. Dawn was just breaking over Manhattan, painting the room in soft, golden light. These quiet morning moments had become precious, a peaceful interlude before the day began. "You're hovering again," Madison said softly, not looking up from Victoria's face. Their daughter had grown remarkably, now a healthy 7 pounds and increasingly alert. Her eyes, which had settled into the same striking green as her mother's, tracked everything with intense curiosity. "Just appreciating the view." Theodore moved into the room, his bare feet silent on the plush carpet. He'd long since abandoned his formal sleepwear for comfortable pants and t-shirts, another transformation in his previously rigid lifestyle. Madison looked up then, and his breath caught. Her long brown hair was twisted in a messy braid. She wore one of his old Harvard t-shirts over her yoga pants, and she'd never looked more beautiful. Living together had been an exercise in careful boundaries and unspoken feelings. They'd developed a comfortable routine, sharing meals, taking turns with night feedings, working together to give Victoria the best of both of them. But moments, like this, quiet, intimate, filled with possibility, tested Theodore's resolve to maintain the just friends agreement. "Penny for your thoughts?" Madison asked, adjusting Victoria as she finished her morning feeding. Theodore moved to the window, watching the city wake up below. "I was thinking about that night at the cafe, when I made the biggest mistake of my life." Madison's hands stilled on Victoria's back. "Theo, let me finish, please." He turned, back to face them. "I've spent every day since then learning what real strength looks like. It's not about control or certainty. It's about this, watching you teaching our daughter colors at 3 a.m. because she's wide awake. It's about trusting enough to be vulnerable, to admit when you're wrong, to love without guarantees." Victoria chose that moment to make her signature, happy gurgle, a sound that never failed to melt both their hearts. Madison stood to place her in the crib, but Theodore stepped forward. "May I?" She handed him their daughter, watching as he expertly cradled Victoria against his chest. Gone was the nervous new father afraid of breaking his premature baby. In his place stood a man completely at ease with his child, humming softly as he paced the room. "You've changed so much," Madison observed, curling up in the rocking chair. "I had good teachers." He smiled down at Victoria, who was fighting sleep with her usual determination. "Both of you taught me what matters most." Madison was quiet for a long moment, watching them. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "I'm not scared anymore." Theodore's heart skipped. "Of what?" "Of this. Of us." She stood, moving to join them by the crib. "These past months, watching you with her, seeing how you've grown, how we've grown together." She touched Victoria's tiny hand. "The man who ran away that night in the cafe? He's not you anymore." "Madison," his voice was rough with emotion. "I'm not saying it will be easy," she continued. "We have a lot to work through, a lot to rebuild. But Theo?" She finally met his eyes. "I'm ready to try. For real this time." Victoria had finally dozed off, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. Theodore carefully laid her in the crib, making sure her favorite bear was within reach. When he straightened, Madison was still watching him, her green eyes full of emotions he'd dreamed of seeing again. "Are you sure?" he asked, needing to hear it. "Because if we do this, if we really try again, I'm all in, Madison. No holding back, no running away. You and Victoria, you're everything." She stepped closer, close enough that he could catch the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with baby powder. "Do you remember what you said in the NICU? About facing the unknown together?" "Every word." "That's what I want." She reached up, touching his cheek where his beard had grown slightly scruffy. "The unknown, the challenges, the joy, all of it together." Theodore covered her hand with his, turning to press a kiss to her palm. "Together," he agreed softly. The moment hung between them, full of possibility. Then Madison smiled. That radiant, full smile he'd fallen in love with years ago. "Are you going to kiss me, Mr. Langston, or do I need to make the first move again?" Again? He raised an eyebrow, playing along despite his pounding heart. As I recall, I was the one who asked you to dance at that charity gala. And look how well that turned out. Theodore pulled her closer, one hand sliding into her hair. Oh, I don't know. I think this might turn out even better. When their lips finally met, it felt like coming home. Not to the past they'd shared, but to something new, something stronger, built on understanding, growth, and the tiny miracle sleeping peacefully beside them. A soft knock interrupted them. Eleanor stood in the doorway, looking both amused and satisfied. Sorry to interrupt what is clearly a significant moment, but Victoria's pediatrician is here for her checkup. Madison started to pull away, but Theodore kept her close. Give us a minute? Eleanor's smile widened. Take two. I'll entertain the doctor with Victoria's latest stats. She closed the door quietly behind her. She's never going to let us live this down. Madison laughed softly. She's earned the right to say, I told you so. Theodore touched his forehead to hers. She never lost faith in us, even when I had. Faith, Madison mused, glancing at their sleeping daughter. Like believing in miracles? Exactly like that. He kissed her again, gentle and sweet. Thank you for giving me a second chance. For giving us a second chance. Thank you for becoming the man I always knew you could be. She smiled against his lips. The man our daughter deserves as her father. Victoria stirred slightly, perhaps sensing the emotion in the room. Both parents moved to the crib, watching as she settled back to sleep. One tiny hand curled around her bear's ear. We should get ready for the doctor, Madison said, though she made no move to leave. Theodore wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them watching their daughter. In a minute, let's just be here. In this moment. Outside, Manhattan continued its morning rush. Eleanor charmed the pediatrician with Victoria's latest developments. The world spun on as it always had. But in the nursery, bathed in early morning light, a family that had almost been lost found its way home. Not to what they had been, but to what they were always meant to become. Victoria sighed in her sleep, a peaceful sound that echoed the contentment in her parents' hearts. They had faced fear and failure, had learned to trust and hope again, had discovered that love, like their daughter, could grow stronger through life's challenges. And in the end, that was the greatest miracle of all. And that, my darling girl, is how Mommy and Daddy found their way back to each other, Madison whispered, adjusting the delicate lace on Victoria's first birthday dress. Their daughter, now a healthy, vibrant 1-year-old with her mother's green eyes and her father's determined spirit, bounced excitedly in Madison's lap. The penthouse's terrace had been transformed for the occasion. Soft twinkle lights draped overhead, creating a magical atmosphere in the early evening light. Eleanor had outdone herself with the planning, ensuring every detail was perfect. From the tiny cloud-shaped cookies to the elegant photo display chronicling Victoria's journey from their fierce NICU warrior to the happy, thriving toddler she'd become. Is she ready? Theodore appeared in the doorway of Victoria's nursery, his casual elegance a far cry from his once rigid CEO persona. The guests are arriving. Almost. Madison smiled, watching him cross the room to join them, just telling her our story again. Theodore knelt beside the rocking chair, still their favorite spot, and took Victoria's tiny hand. The best story ever, isn't it, Princess? He pressed a kiss to their daughter's curls, then lifted his face to steal a quick kiss from Madison. His wedding ring caught the light as he did so, the simple gold band they'd exchanged 2 months ago in an intimate ceremony right here on this terrace. Dada, Victoria declared, reaching for him with the perfect timing she'd possessed since birth. Her vocabulary was growing daily, something Madison credited to their nightly reading sessions. There's my girl. Theodore scooped her up, expertly avoiding any wrinkles to her special dress. Ready to show everyone how amazing you are? Victoria's answering laugh was all the response they needed. Madison stood, smoothing her own elegant dress, a soft blue that matched the party's theme. Eleanor will kill us if we're late to our own daughter's party. Eleanor's probably already reorganized the gift table twice, Theodore chuckled. Did you see the spreadsheet she made for opening presents in optimal order? Of course she did. Madison linked her arm through his free one as they headed toward the terrace. Though we have to admit, her organizational skills came in handy. Planning the wedding. They paused in the doorway, taking in the gathered crowd. Their closest friends and family mingled beneath the lights, while Eleanor directed the final touches with her characteristic efficiency. The NICU team had a special table of honor, the people who had helped give them their miracle. Look, who's here? Eleanor called out, spotting them. The birthday girl arrives. Victoria waved regally to her admirers, a gesture that made both parents laugh. Their daughter had inherited Theodore's natural command of a room, combined with Madison's warm ability to make everyone feel special. Hard to believe it's been a year, Madison said softly as they made their way to greet their guests. Theodore squeezed her hand. Best year of my life. Even with the sleepless nights, the board meetings you had to attend via video because someone wouldn't nap, the time she decided to redecorate your quarterly reports with pureed carrots, especially then. He grinned. Though I still maintain those reports looked better orange. They reached the center of the terrace where a special high chair awaited the guest of honor. Theodore settled Victoria into it while Madison adjusted her birthday crown, a gift from Eleanor, naturally. As their friends gathered to sing, Theodore wrapped an arm around Madison's waist. They watched their daughter's face light up at the glowing candle on her smash cake, her tiny hands clapping in delight. Make a wish, sweet girl, Madison encouraged. Theodore pressed a kiss to his wife's temple. What more could we wish for? We have everything right here. Victoria chose that moment to dive face first into her cake, sending frosting flying with impressive accuracy. The crowd erupted in laughter and camera flashes as she emerged triumphant, covered in blue icing but utterly delighted with herself. Everything, Madison agreed, laughing as she helped clean their frosting-covered champion. Plus a lifetime of adventures ahead. Eleanor appeared with backup napkins and a knowing smile. You know, when I first pushed Theodore to fix things, I never imagined we'd end up here. Yes, you did, both parents replied simultaneously. Well, Eleanor's perfectly maintained composure cracked into a grin. Maybe I had a feeling. Victoria offered her godmother a frosting-covered hand in agreement which Eleanor accepted with uncharacteristic disregard for her designer outfit. Some things, after all, were more precious than perfect appearances. As the party continued around them, Theodore and Madison shared a look that said everything without words. They had faced their fears, rebuilt their trust, and created something stronger than before. Their love story hadn't followed a straight path, but its detours and challenges had led them exactly where they were meant to be. And watching their miracle daughter charm every guest at her party, they knew this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. Some love stories, after all, don't end with happily ever after. They simply open the door to a new chapter, filled with endless possibilities and promises kept. Victoria's laughter rang out across the terrace, a sound of pure joy that echoed in her parents' hearts. This was their real miracle, not just their daughter's survival, but the family they'd become, strong enough to face any challenge, wise enough to cherish every moment, and brave enough to keep choosing each other every single day, together, always. If you had received a wrong medical diagnosis that destroyed your relationship, and 6 months later found out the truth when you saw your ex-lover pregnant, how would you handle the situation? Would you have Theodore's courage to regain lost trust, or would the fear of getting hurt again be stronger? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.